Hey guys, I hope that everyone is doing okay. Today I would like to show you why the King's Indian attack is one of my favorite openings. And one of the main reasons for that is that it is very practical. We can play it pretty much against every single opening, almost every single opening, like in this case against the French defense. This game that I would like to show you a little bit later will be the game against Campello, a Brazilian player. I played it in Béthune in a tournament in France. But before we move forward, I just want to mention that this opening can also happen and can be played against various lines, like in particular the Taimano Sicilian, so any Sicilian that starts with the move e6. So basically, whenever this pawn comes on e6, that's a signal that you can eventually push your pawn to d3, thus trying to get into your favorite King's Indian defense with not one but two extra tempos. I have seen also people who are playing the King's Indian attack even after a move like d6, they still go for d3. But to me that's a little bit too much. To me the idea is that you want to get in your favorite opening, but with an extra tempo. So you're playing positions that you're familiar with, and you're playing them with one extra tempo, and that will definitely give you some extra possibilities, some extra chances. So this approach is not new, of course, and everybody knows that there are certain openings in which this is happening immediately on move number one, like the English opening, which by it means after the move e5 is some sort of reverse Sicilian. And of course nowadays an opening which is very, very popular at the top level, and this is the London system with bishop f4. So in the bishop f4, usually what black is doing is actually the reversed Slav defense. The likes of some of the great players of the past, like Nimzovich, Reti, of course, Larsen after that, and nowadays the likes of Magnus Carlsen, among the others, made these openings and this approach very, very popular. But there is also the King's Indian attack, which is by itself reversed King's Indian defense. So typical line here, and one of the main lines, is the one where black in the French defense goes for this setup. It's King's Indian defense, as I have told you, except that this pawn is on e6, so it's not on e5, and that makes it a bit easier for white to start an attack on the king side. And what is also very good about this opening is that the moves that white is doing are more or less predetermined. They are all the same. So if you know the skeleton of the position, if you know the typical ideas, you're more or less playing automatical moves. So up to move, let's say 15, sometimes up to move number 20, you know how to arrange your pieces, and that makes the preparation very easy in most of the cases. And if you are not very theoretical player, or if you're a little bit more practical, if you have lesser time to study the opening theory, this could be one way for you to try to avoid the major lines. Plus, if you like some close positions like this one, where you have clear areas on which both sides are going to attack, this should be your cup of tea. For instance, here after knight f1, what white is doing automatically is he pushes the pawn on h4, this knight is going after that to g4, this pawn continues moving towards the h6 square, this bishop is coming on f4, and white is trying to attack on the king side, and this is a standard plan which was predetermined by the move e5, because whenever the pawn steps on the e5 square, you're knocking this knight away from the f6 square, which makes it not as effective on the king side defense, or the king side defensive setup. And you can see that the white pieces are already even visually eyeballing the king side, which means that his attack is going to run more or less smoothly there, whereas black is of course trying to attack on the other side, and he's trying to keep the opponents busy as much as he can. So okay, after the move b4, knight to h2, a4 was played. This is again very typical, it's sort of mainstream theory, and I just stopped the attack of the opponent by playing the move a3. So whenever you have opposite attacks, you're of course trying to slow down the opponent as much as you can. So this extra tempo that you might get can be eventually the difference between him taking your queen side and keeping you busy there, and you mating him on the other side. Very common stuff. Now my opponent played a move bishop b5, but I think that b3 and rook b8 looks a bit more natural, or maybe even knight e4 instead of that. But there is nothing wrong with the move bishop b5. People have played like that, and he's defending the pawn on a4. Knight g4 natural, as we said. Knight e4 also an important move in his attacking and defensive setup at the same time, because this knight is ready to trade an important defender on f3. So here I played again the most obvious move h5, and then he came up with this very aggressive idea b3, which looks quite scary, but in reality this might be, if not the decisive, but very serious mistake. For the second player is missing an important tactical nuance. Now, people playing here a move like h6 every once in a while, especially when this knight is challenged, they can afford doing this, but they, of course, have to always think about the possible sacrifices on the h6 square. So this is, again, it's very double-edged, and not everybody likes to play this way. Not everybody is as cold as the computer and just sitting there and saying, oh, there is nothing. You sacrifice, I'll take it, and I'll win this after that with the extra piece. In most of the cases, people are very scared to do this. Speaking of that, just to mention one important detail here, whenever the knight is on d4, now the sacrifice is a bit more difficult to be carried out, because after, say, bishop h6, pawn takes, and queen h6, he has knight f3, bishop f3, and bishop g5, and that's one thing that you have to be aware of. And after knight f6, he can take with the queen. Yes, so this is one thing that you have to watch out for if you're going to attack like this. But back to the game. Why is the move b3 not that good? Well, the reason for that is that I can play the move c4, which I did play in the game, rather than taking that pawn, which was black's idea, after which he, of course, has very strong compensation. He is attacking both my pawns. I just play the move c4, and I'm trying to lock the position in the center, and this is the common strategy and the best strategy for white in this position. You want your center to be stabilized so that you can eventually make the opponent on the other side. My opponent took on f3. He didn't dare to take on c4 because he realized that he'll be losing the exchange here. And the problem is not in the fact that he is losing the exchange. People are sacrificing an exchange like that every once in a while for a long diagonal for the bishop. The problem is that these two, they are not standing properly. If the queen was in front and the bishop from behind, that would be a very sound sacrifice, and black is going to have plenty of initiative for the sacrificed exchange. Here, however, I really doubt his initiative. Rook c1 is one idea just to play like this, or knight e3 is also nice, and after bishop c5 and queen e1. I don't exactly see anything decisive or anything troublesome for white. If bishop h1, of course, there'll be the move f3, so nothing really to worry about. Also, notice that after c takes d4, I can throw in a move like h6 if I wish to, and only after that take on e8, which might be even a tad more accurate. And then again, bishop h1 is always nothing with the queen from behind. He just doesn't have the time for this. So this is why my opponent took on f3. I took back with the bishop, and then he played the move bishop c6 here. The c4 makes no sense at all, because after the c4 he'll be losing a whole rook, not even the exchange, but a whole rook, because after this capture the knight will be hanging also on d7. And yeah, logically he didn't go for this. He went for bishop c6, but then after cd5 and bishop d5, nothing really changes cd5 because of knight e3, and there is a problem with this pawn, plus the knight is still coming towards the f5 square. So after cd5 and bishop d5, ed5, knight e3, give me the pawn, and knight f5, I think that that's one of those strategical failures that people sometimes get into unnoticeably, but from which there is no way back. And this is the beauty of openings like this. If you understand them, if you know them very well, then you can get a winning position without your opponent even understanding what happened. So this knight on f5 is a killer. This pawn on h5 is another killer. And then you have the e5 pawn, but also the queen is landing on g4, the bishop ready to attack. And of course, you have a lot of room for your rooks to be lifted. So I really doubt that this is a position that black can that can survive, excuse me. He played rook e6, which was a clever idea, trying to defend along the 6th rank and trying to stop the move e6. King h8, I thought during the game, I have some vague memories. This was back in 2003, so I don't quite remember what exactly I was thinking, but I have some vague memories that I intended to push e6 anyway. And that sounds very logical, because after the trade, my rooks are entering on the e-file, and also my attack is running clear on the king side. That should be again, winning advantage. Rook e6, still queen g4, g6, and rook c1, highlighting the fact that this pawn might be vulnerable, but also setting the stage for some small tactical blows like knight takes d4 in some of the lines. So here after rook e4, I am ready. Now, first of all, I overprotected that pawn, but I'm also ready to attack like this. The rook on e4 is ready to be lifted further for the attack. But at the same time, it is sheltering the king from some possible nasty checks on this diagonal. So that's why I'm playing like this. And then he played rook e8, if queen c7, that's obvious, knight e4. And if he tries attacking the pawn like this, that's also obvious. I can take on e7, which I could have done also after queen c7, by the way, on e6. And yeah, this pawn is moving and he is resigning. Rook e8 changes nothing, for I can take on g6. And now if he takes with the pawn, the attack is running by itself. King g2, followed by the rook coming on h1, queen h3, and mate. I think that will be inevitable. Knight h6 could be also thrown every once in a while. And if he takes on g6 with the rook, which is what he did, then that means that the damage on the king side is irreparable. And after the check and queen f5, all the white pieces are coming, and he can never capture on h6. For after the recapture and king g2, that will be a decisive check, followed by another if needed. And sometimes you can also take on s7 if you wish before that. So with such a naked king, obviously black cannot do anything, and he couldn't do anything in the game after rook f8 because after king g2 again the white pieces are entering the battle. Here taking on h6 is obviously even worse, mate is happening immediately, and rook f8 that he played changes nothing, for I still go king g2 and I still go rook h1, and if he ever captures on h6 then I trade everybody and meet him in the same old way. Or, okay, he can sacrifice the queen, but that would be nothing, of course. And finally, bishop f4 that he did in the game was answered with rook takes f4. I opened room now for the knight to come on f5. And that's not something that he can stop. He took check and another check, and since the king is getting checkmated in the middle of the board, he'll be losing at least the queen. My opponent had to resign. So, typical game for the King's Indian. What I did was just I followed the routine, I developed my pieces, and then when a chance occurred, I simply brought my knight to the optimal square using the c4 move, which, yeah, it was a difficult move to find, but not that difficult if it's just one move to find. After this, everything was super logical, and once the knight came on f5, it was all curtains for black strategically. And of course tactically. So that's the reason why I like this opening. And I forgot to mention at the beginning that besides the move e4, you can also enter those positions with this move order, knight f3, g3, and bishop g2. So it is pretty flexible. And if you want to learn something more about the opening, I will be very happy to see you at our seminar. Thanks for watching this. I hope to see you soon.